we are giving the context for Psalm 34 right in the title. We're told that this is a psalm of David when he pretended madness before Abimelech, who drove him away, and he departed. Abimelech is a name for a Philistine king, and this event is recorded for us in 1 Samuel 21, verses 10 through 15, where if you recall that story, David is on the run from Saul, and he flees into Gath, and his reputation has gone before him. Remember, Saul slew his thousands, David his 10,000s. Well, the Philistines remember that, and they bring him to the king of the Philistines, and they're in fear that he is a threat to them. And so what does David do? He's run from Saul, he's now in the hands of the Philistines, and he feigns madness. He pretends that he is insane. Not exactly a paragon of trust in the Lord at this moment, is he? But this psalm is penned on that occasion, after God has delivered him from the Philistines, even through the means of pretending insanity. And so in the first section of this psalm, we have praise. Verses 1 through 3, David wastes no time in getting to praising God for his deliverance. Even though he has used means of deceit, God has still delivered him. And David praises him for that. Spurgeon comments on verse 1 in David's praise. He says, "Even when a mercy may remind us of our sin, we are not to rob God of his honor." David gives the glory to God, even though his means, his lack of faith, his deceit were not proper. The second section of the psalm is verses 4 through 7. We have David's testimony of himself and others. He shares his own experience in verses 4 and 6, and then the experience of the righteous in general in verse 5. In verse 7, David writes, "The angel of the Lord encamps around all those who fear him and delivers them." Again, thinking of the context of this psalm, it's fascinating that David, in his moment of distress, he failed to trust God, chose instead to act deceitfully, and yet he recognizes here that the angel of the Lord was still there. The verse doesn't say the angel delivers those when they trust in him. He delivers those who fear him, even when they fail to trust in him. What an encouragement, what an amazing comfort that is. Even when we fail, the angel of the Lord is still there, whether it's not based on our performance. In verses 8 through 10, there is an invitation for others to come worship. Notice the balance in David's approach to God here. Verse 8, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." This is a reminder to us that knowing God is not just about mentally assenting to propositions or abstract truths, but it's an experience that involves the whole body. And what I mean by that, all throughout this psalm, David uses imagery, sense perception. The mouth, the tongue, the lips, the eyes, taste, the ears, all of these are to be used and to receive God, not just minds. But notice the other side of the invitation in verse 9. "Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints." The experience of being close to God is accompanied with a fear, an awe, a dread of the holiness of God. In verses 11 through 14, there is instruction. David speaks to children. He says, "Come, you children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord." In verse 12, at the very center of the psalm, David asks the question, "What man is there who desires life and loves many days that he may see good?" That's everybody. It's a rhetorical question. But again, thinking in terms of the context of this psalm, David has sought to preserve his life by acting foolishly. But what is the advice he gives to children here about how to live a long life, a long and happy, good life? He says in verse 13, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. He's learned his lesson. In verses 15 through 18, we have sanctions. God's mercy is over the righteous and near to the brokenhearted, while God's curse is on those who do evil. And then in verses 19 through 22, there is the promise. God's promises here are not health and prosperity and security, but rather He promises afflictions for believers. Rather, and also with and accompanying those afflictions, there is deliverance. Notice the dual purpose of afflictions. It says in verse 21 that evil shall slay the wicked. The afflictions hurt and slay the unbeliever, but those same afflictions are used as opportunities for God to deliver the believer. And then we have the promise, and it doesn't look like a promise, but in verse 20, He guards all His bones, not one of them is broken. Well, what does that mean? John, in his gospel, in chapter 19, verse 36, says that this promise was fulfilled on the cross when the soldiers came by and broke the legs of the thieves hanging on the cross beside Jesus, but they didn't break Jesus' legs because Jesus was already dead. And he recalls this promise that not a bone will be broken. Is that saying that believers will never suffer injury or broken bones? Of course not. But it's a reminder to us that even in the darkest day of history, the end of Christ's passion, He's dead, He's been beaten, He's been crucified, He's been betrayed, He's been forsaken by the Father. Even this darkest moment, people could look upon Christ on the cross, and that should have set off in their minds. They didn't break His bones. It's a visual symbol to them of what was to come 3 days later, when He would redeem the life of His servant, as verse 21 says. So, whether it is in this life or into the next, God will deliver His people from their afflictions. So let us take comfort in that.